A con man has a crisis of faith in a small Kansas town. Listen as we talk about the determination of wrestling champions, touching toes under a tree, and the perks of dating a Broadway producer. Then we find out if Leap of Faith stands a test of time.
Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? James says gladiator with a glut. Alan says as a father, blah blah. It's the test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today?
And hallelujah, folks. It's James Brief here with the Test of Time podcast, and we are going to be talking and praising the movie Leap of Faith. And I'm here with my friend and my podcast partner, Alan Noah. How are you, Alan?
I'm fine. That was a bold prediction that we're going to be praising it.
Oh, I mean praising. No, whether we're going to actually mark this as standing the test of time or not, that means to be seen. I'm just playing the little circus tent revival con man there.
Okay.
You know, maybe I'm conning the listeners into thinking we're both going to think it's great, and then we'll pull the rug under them and somehow get their money.
I mean, podcasts get money from listeners. There's Patreons and things like that. I mean, we don't do that, but we could. Maybe as people are listening to this podcast episode, we'll just show up next to them with a bucket and go, like pointing to the bucket. They'll know what we mean.
That's true. I saw something interesting, Al. This is episode number 428. And
yeah.
I happen to see that 428 is something called the angel number.
Why is that?
Because Google says it, and
okay.
on several websites. But it says on this one particular website called angelicnumber.com.
Okay.
It says the angel number 428 is a signal from the universe suggesting abundance and financial stability are on the way to you, provided you maintain a positive outlook and continue hard work.
I mean, that's fairly appropriate for the movie Leap of Faith.
Exactly.
I mean, right? Like, that plays into what Jonas says, where he's talking about you have to believe in order for these good things to happen.
And, we're definitely going to talk about Leap of Faith, and it's a movie about kind of a con artist, the revival tent performer guy played by Steve Martin. And he's very famous for something that was very popular before we were born. That was the comedy album. And Steve Martin, Richard Pryor, these guys were all incredibly famous for just selling albums of their comedy routine. Who else was a comedy legend on the vinyl? I mean, Rodney Dangerfield, and you had all these guys that,
I mean, George Carlin.
George Carlin, yeah.
That's how I kind of became familiar with George Carlin. Maybe I saw some of his stand-up specials on HBO, but I would get them on CD and then just listen to them over and over and over again, which was easier to do than watching something on HBO over and over again, I guess, unless you taped it. But that's really how I became a huge George Carlin fan, was just listening to his comedy albums.
Oh, yeah. And when I must have been 14 or 15 years old, and I got my first listen to Adam Sandler's comedy album called They're All Gonna Laugh at You. And that had some of his comedy classics. The Hanukkah song would be on his next album.
Right, but that one had the Thanksgiving song.
This had the Thanksgiving song. It had the more skits and the buffoons and the severe beating of a high school janitor and, just absolute ridiculous kind of buffoonery with all of his friends, David Spade and Norm Macdonald. Even Conan O'Brien appears in a couple sketches. And it was just so perfect for me, being young and absolutely being in love with the comedy routine, whether it's a comedy album or later, like you said, the HBO specials, or today, every other kids know their favorite stand-up comedians from their Netflix specials or their, Amazon Prime specials, or, these things that they can just watch over and over and over. And Steve Martin is one of these few guys that has made the leap from a stand-up legend to then a performing legend We go on the Tonight Show, and he also knocks him dead. He's also able to make the leap to movies, of course.
He's a writer. He's an author. He's written novels.
He's directed films. And then he makes another huge artistic leap, and it turns out Steve Martin is one of the world's greatest banjo players.
He also co-created Only Murders in the Building, and he's a producer on that show. And sometimes a producer title is just something they give a star if they're a big name. But I believe he's like pretty influential in the behind the scenes aspect of that show. And you know, that show is what it is, not just because Steve Martin is in it, but because he made that show happen. And that's been, you know, like this epic hit for him while he's in his mid to late 70s, and he's still making amazing new shit. But let's talk about his movie Leap of Faith. For anyone who isn't familiar with this movie, it stars Steve Martin as Jonas Nightingale, a fraudulent faith healer who performs religious revivals in small towns. Jonas and his team use tricks to make people believe in his supposed powers, all while pocketing their money. When his convoy lands in the small, drought-stricken town of Rustwater, Kansas, his team sets up a revival tent, planning to exploit the desperate townspeople. However, Sheriff Will Braverman, played by Liam Neeson, sees through Nightingale's act and tries to expose him as a fraud. Sheriff Will also falls for Jonas's right-hand woman, Jane, played by Deborah Winger. Meanwhile, Jonas becomes romantically interested in Marva, a local waitress with a disabled brother named Boyd. Boyd's faith in Jonas challenges the conman, leading to moral dilemmas. When Jonas faces the possibility of a genuine miracle, he reconsiders his life and his choices. So, James, when this movie came out, did it do as well as one of these tent revivals with cash overflowing from buckets?
Well, this is a film that had a $20 million budget, and it opened on December 18th, 1992. It opened number 9 with $3.2 million. However, it almost had, like a 8 times multiplier, and it ended up with $23 million. So it probably did not make money for the studio. It was not a colossal flop, and then, you know, it was on HBO and whatnot. And I have seen this film exactly twice in my life. And okay. I can't remember if I saw it on HBO or if I saw it on a rental. And I rewatched the trailer. Can you make a guess as to what the trailer is?
I'm guessing it plays up Steve Martin goofball comedy zaniness.
Yeah, it's funny and everyone's laughing and everyone's getting healed. Based on that trailer, it's surprising how little comedy there is in this film. The original star of this film was supposed to be Michael Keaton. Right. And it's a very interesting casting of Steve Martin in this role. That being said, Steve Martin has played dramatic roles, completely straight up dramatic roles before.
I was thinking that too, that I associate Steve Martin as a well-meaning guy in movies. And that's not always true. In Little Shop of Horrors, he's a sadist. In My Blue Heaven, he's a mafia criminal. I've never seen Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, but in that movie, he's also a con man, I believe. So he has played other types of roles, but I think of him more as the guy from Parenthood, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, or even Only Murders in the Building, where he's flawed and not perfect, but he's a good person. And even when the character makes bad decisions, you like the guy. Roxanne, that's a movie we talked about on the podcast. Bowfinger, he's kind of a sleazy movie producer, but he's not like shitty. He's not like a shitty person. In Leap of Faith, he plays a pretty fucking shitty dude. I found him to be really off-putting out of the gate, which is intentional, but it did make me feel like, oh, I kind of hate this Steve Martin character. I'm kind of not used to that.
Interesting point, Alan. He starts out as a con man, and that's not necessarily bad. He talks his way out of a ticket, which is like something anyone wants to do.
Yeah, but it's shitty. He reconnects this cop with his estranged daughter, which is a good thing. As a Jew, I would even call it a mitzvah. But he is doing it for purely selfish reasons. He's turning it into a game with all of his friends listening in. The way that he does it is, I think, supposed to be impressive. It's kind of not, where he just sort of guesses that his daughter's name is Kathy because that's a popular name in the area. Like, that's a pretty big fucking leap. Get it? Leap of faith. Ha ha ha. But it felt really smarmy. And then the next scene is he gets into this diner and he's hitting on Marva, who works there, and he is pulling out all the stops. He's doing his whole spiel with his watch that was given to him by his sainted mother. And then, immediately after, you see that that's just a prop. It's not an important watch. He has a bag with 1 million of them in there, and he's just trying to get laid. And okay, fine, but like, it's all really, really shitty. And then when you meet the Sheriff Will, played by Liam Neeson, and he makes the point that, look, everyone in this town is broke. There's a drought. People can't pay their bills. We just don't need you ripping people off. I was like, yeah, you know what? He's right. I agree with Sheriff Will. And Sheriff Will is ostensibly the antagonist in this movie. He's also a love interest for Jane, but I was like totally on board with what he was saying. I was team Sheriff Will. What about you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's obvious. I mean, these guys are they're con artists.
But is it supposed to be obvious? Like, are you supposed to be rooting for Sheriff Will and not Jonas?
I don't know. At this point, this movie reminds me of John Edwards, not the political candidate, but the guy who could do Crossing Over. And
yeah.
I don't know what he did. I don't even know if there's microphones or not, but all you have to do is kind of say, John, and you even said it yourself, Al. You're like, how did he know Kathy was the daughter's name? Maybe Kathy wouldn't be the daughter's name. He just says Kathy. And this guy, if there's a bunch of Catholics there, there's probably a Kathy, judging by what the statistics here say.
No, he specifically says your daughter, Kathy.
Okay, fine. There's a couple things in this film you have to stretch your imagination for, or, take a leap of faith. But I'm not really offended by him yet because he's a bad guy, but not a violent man. And there's, bad guys do redemptions. And that's actually who better than someone like Steve Martin. And he is a little bit of a lovable scoundrel because we meet this character played by Lucas Haas, Boyd. Are we ever told exactly what his handicap is?
No. And I was going to ask you about that as a doctor, but he was in a car accident and he is crippled, but also he can walk pretty okay on those crutches.
Right.
It's not like he's paralyzed or anything like that. Like, he has use of his legs while on the crutches.
Exactly. And, I was just wondering, I didn't believe they had ever used the word paraplegic or anything like that.
No.
Yeah, therefore, there leaves ability that, okay, maybe it was going to recover at some point. And
right.
As we see later, he is able to stand at some point. But he does not want to put Boyd on stage, even though Boyd wants to be cured. And of course, he also doesn't want to be exposed as a fraud. And I'm not justifying him as part of the fraud. He puts all the, real sick people, he's purposely put them towards the back so that they won't be able to stand up and won't be able to be seen, so I can't call them up. But there's a little bit of integrity, at least a smidgen in Act 1, that there is a good guy in here.
That's much later than Act 1. That's like Act 3.
Okay, well, or even the fact that he takes a little shine to him. He's not a complete scumbag. He's just doing his con, not particularly to take this town out. Isn't it like their truck broke down or something? They weren't supposed to come here.
Yes, their truck breaks down. They're stuck there for 4 days. They were supposed to go to, I think, Topeka or Wichita, and they're stuck there. So he says, well, let's just set up shop here. We'll do a tent here.
Right. I mean, he's used to fleecing big city folk. So I'm saying at least in Act 1, he may not realize what, taking $1,000 a night does to a town like this, or, however amount they said.
I guess my point is that, in My Blue Heaven, Steve Martin plays a criminal. And I think that movie does something very smart where you know that his character is stealing stuff. And there's all these jokes where he's caught with all of this stolen merchandise and he has to explain where he got all of these fish and books and stereos and things. But you never see him steal it. That happens off screen. And in this movie, you see him ripping people off.
Absolutely.
And then I hate him because I'm watching him do it.
Yes.
And at one point in the movie, Jane is defending Jonas to Will, and she says that all he's doing is selling fairy tales. And he kind of says something about, in New York City, you pay a lot of money to see a show, and you're getting entertained. And that's what he's doing. And that's how he justifies his con. And there's some logic in there that if he's just telling you nice stories and you're hearing good music, the gospel singers are amazing, and he's telling you stories from the Bible, okay, that's worth something, that's worth some time. But that is kind of glossing over the more sinister aspect of it, which is you need to pay money to me so that I can make your life better. God will make your life better. And if you don't, well, then you don't have faith and you don't deserve to have these good things happen to you. And the way that they do it is by paying attention, listening to what the people are saying. They're passing notes around. They have surveillance. They have microphones. So they're all talking to each other, which is, a clever way to find out information. And, some of it is, oh, this guy's on the bottle. Oh, you must give up the bottle. And then he touches the forehead and, okay, that quote unquote cures him. There's one line about this teenage girl who's pregnant. And they're like, oh, well, maybe don't mention that she's pregnant in front of her whole family. Also, her mom beats her. And then Jonas is like, it is a sin to strike a child. And then he touches her and she falls down and says, whoa. And it's like, okay, did he just cure child abuse for this person? Like, what?
Oh, I loved this scene. I actually really loved it because these traveling shows have been going on forever, and they go on to this day, and they absolutely heal people. Of course, it's a con. And I actually loved the scene because I thought it was kind of cool seeing one possible way that this con goes. And it's not purely done on information. Steve Martin's character, Jonas, he has to sell it. And this is the only scene where I completely understood why you would cast Steve Martin. I thought this scene he was great in for the purpose that he was supposed to play, which is he's a scumbag. And I thought he played the role fantastic. It reminds me of like wrestling, like WWE wrestling. A lot of people, they just like wrestling because they know the story is scripted.
Or is it?
No,
it is.
It's not fake when those people are like jumping off, like, it's very acrobatic. Then there's another half of the people that they really, to this day, believe it's somehow that this guy really is the quote unquote champion through some kind of like grit and determination, like we just saw in the Olympics, some guy coming with all of his or her might and determination. Unfortunately, that's what this whole thing is. There's some people that for them, it's just like going to church. They may not believe it, or synagogue, or whatever your temple is. You just kind of go because you either feel good or you're like, I used to go here with my grandma or whatever, and you just sit there, or for whatever reason. But then there are other people that really believe that they are there to save their soul. And I just thought it was a fantastic scene, though, of watching them flawlessly and marvelously just fleece these people. Then Liam Neeson's character, the sheriff, he barges in. He's like, I want to make a testimony. He says something about, help all these people, these poor people, get the hell out of here. And Jonas, in that moment of panic, this is where the microphones are not going to help you. You have to be a great con man like Jonas. In that moment, he says, absolutely. I'm not here to take your money. This is just to support our church and blah, blah, blah. And we want to help people. But you know what? To prove that I'm just here to spread the gospel and the Lord and what miracles and whatnot, I'm giving everyone their money back. And I remembered this scene, and I thought it was so clever because they gave everyone their money back, but a few people, they purposely gave a little bit or a significant amount more money when they just handed their money back. If they said they gave $60, some of these people were handed like $80, $100, $120, double their money. So the next day, Liam Neeson was like, see, I'm glad, this is all a con. And people are like, it's not a con. I woke up and I had double the money. And holy shit, he fucking had him. And I just thought it was brilliant. I mean, that was a con I was not expecting. The microphones, everything, that's just what I was expecting. But I thought it was a brilliant con in front of everyone.
It is. It's smart. When Jonas was saying, okay, everyone can take their money back, I was kind of waiting for some reaction from the other people in his troupe. There's Meatloaf and Philip Seymour Hoffman and MC Gainey. Like, I was waiting for one of those guys to be like, oh, the old give them their money back thing. Sure, we've done that one before. Or the opposite and say, Jonas, what the hell are you doing? We never give our money back. This is unprecedented. I kind of wanted to know if that was a thing that they do, or if that was, a brand new technique that they were working on. And it does appear later that they've done something like this before, and, they know how to slip a secret 20 in with certain people, so that way they'll be surprised the next day. Also, you didn't mention that when Sheriff Will comes in there, he exposes Jonas. He tells everyone that he was a criminal and his whole past, and that affects him. You see it on Jonas's face. He's hurt by that. And then, kind of to your point that he's quick on his feet, he comes back and says, yup, that's all true. And because I was such a sinner, then I can help you with your lesser sins because you don't want to know the shit I've done. But that's also very smart.
Not everyone is able to sell it, but sometimes you can sell that redemption story and people really like it. Jonas is quick on his feet and he does it. I thought that was great. And at this point, to me, I think the movie's very interesting. I'm not crazy about the side story, the love interest between Deborah Winger's Jane and Liam Neeson. I think it's a little bit too on the nose. She's what we're supposed to be thinking. Oh, maybe it is bad. And she goes to Jonas and tries to get him to stop. And I just wasn't crazy about how that formulated.
I totally agree with you. They've known each other for a couple days and they are madly in love. And he's basically proposing to her. She's ready to give up her entire life for him. And come on. My only reaction to that is, come on. And yeah, they address it. They say, oh, but I've only known you a couple days. That doesn't make it okay. It still feels forced and something from a movie, which is obviously what it is.
I don't really know what the deal is with them at first because he says, come out with me, let me show you the farm and stuff. And he's, trying to show her what a simple, nice town this is. And don't try to rip us off. I thought that's what he was doing at first. The next time she goes over, when she's a little mad at Jonas and she goes there kind of to retreat, the next time we see them, he's touching her toes. And I'm like, I guess they slept together because they're sitting under a tree in this beautiful country estate of his, and he's just massaging her perfectly pedicured toes. I'm like, I don't think if you've just gone on a date or maybe you've kissed that you could do what he just did to her toes. I'm like, that was an interesting way to me to show that they had slept together.
There are definitely scenes that were written for this movie that were either never shot or were shot and then cut. And I think that's probably one of them. But there's a point where Jane is asking Jonas about Marva, and he's like, oh, well, I still haven't had any luck with her. And we've only seen one time of them interacting. So clearly there was another scene where he hits on her again and then fails before that conversation. And it's fine that it's cut from the movie. I picked up on that. Most people probably wouldn't, or just assume that, oh, he hit on her again and it happened off camera. Who cares? But stuff like that is a little annoying, I think. But with Marva and Boyd, you see some maybe potential growth with Jonas after Marva tells him the story of Boyd, that there was a drunk driver and it was a terrible car accident. It killed their parents. He was injured in some nondescript way where he can walk with crutches, but he doesn't have full use of his legs. And there was another preacher who came to town and did a similar kind of revival thing, apparently. It didn't cure Boyd, and that preacher told Boyd, it's because you don't have enough faith. And you see it on Jonas's face where he's like, well, that's fucking shitty. That's something that apparently is a line in the sand that he won't cross. Although then later on, Jane says, oh, well, when we have so many people here, if there's someone who's really sick and you can't heal them, we'll just do our insurance policy, which is you tell them your faith isn't strong enough. So clearly that is something out of his playbook. But when Boyd shows up at that big revival, Jonas does something different. He doesn't say, I'm not going to be able to heal you because you don't have enough faith, Boyd. He points the finger literally at Sheriff Will and says, you have doubt, and if you have doubt, then I can't heal him. Which I guess in a way is nicer because he's not putting the blame on the innocent kid. Great, but he's also putting the blame on someone else who is innocent and, you know, could potentially turn this entire town against their sheriff, which is also a shitty thing to do.
Yeah, shitty thing to do. I agree.
Then let's unpack that turn where Boyd then does go over to the crucifix. He touches the feet of the statue, and then he loses the crutches. Jonas doesn't know what to make of that. At first, he thinks that Boyd was conning him and like he got out-conned. Maybe it was a real miracle. How did you interpret Boyd's healing?
I think that the film wrongly stepped into the supernatural here, or at least is it supernatural? Yeah, it depends your outlook on it. And at the very end of the film, another recurring wish for the congregation is they just wanted it to rain and rain and rain. At the very end of the film, it's a torrentious thunderstorm.
What thunderstorm? Did you say torrentious?
No, let's just say I said thunderstorm.
I'm pretty sure you said torrentious. Did you mean torrential? That's funny.
Well, to answer your question, I wasn't a big fan of that because it wasn't explained. I wish I had a line from when they talked about Boyd's injury, when they said, the doctor said there's a chance he's going to walk again, but they just don't know when. And then that kind of hints to you, maybe it will happen later in the film. And then that would explain, okay, there's a little bit of, positive thinking and maybe the faith, maybe God helped him do it. And then I'd also say, and also science said that this was possible for this kid to walk again. I would have at least liked that because you feel like you would have heard that prognosis somewhere in the film, whether it was possible he might ever walk again.
She says something about that he'd gone to 1 million doctors and seen a lot of specialists, and then one of the specialists said, go to see a healer. So it's not explicitly clear.
It seems to be explicitly clear that no physician said it was possible. I wish they said, 0.1% chance. It's a 999 out of 1,000. It's not going to happen. And, I'm really sorry. You're going to be in a wheelchair. And then look, he's 1 out of 1,000. Fine. The rain, it's rain. I mean, eventually it rains everywhere, right?
First off, I don't think you're wrong. All of what you're saying is totally valid. But I will say, just playing devil's advocate, faith, devil, I don't know, you could argue that it is intentionally ambiguous because that's the thing about faith, right? You don't know for sure if it's working because you believe in it or not. You have to take that leap of faith.
Right.
And you can interpret it that, yeah, this kid was going to walk anyway. It was bound to happen. Or you could interpret it that it was totally in his head and he always could have walked. Or you could interpret it that when he believed, when he had faith, that gave him the strength to lose the crutches. And no answer is going to be definitive. Same thing with the rain. Jonas sees that after this revival, everyone in the community is there. They're sitting outside. They're cooking for each other. They're connecting. They are being a community. And then it rains. So is that a causation or is it a correlation? If everyone had been home that night watching TV, would it still have rained? You could argue yes, because of barometric pressure or whatever. I don't know what causes rain. Or was it because this was God's will? The movie doesn't give you a clear answer, and you could chalk it up to lazy script writing. You could chalk it up to bad directing, or you could say, no, that's kind of the point, because you don't know. You don't get an answer. And I think that if the movie had done something really cheesy where a light comes down from the sky and you hear the ha, and it makes it very, very clear, yes, this was God doing it, then you just roll your eyes and you say, come on, really? To be clear, I'm not saying that this movie has a brilliant script. I think there are a lot of problems with it, especially in the third act and the way that these things resolve. But I was thinking about it of like, well, that's kind of the whole thing with faith, is that you just don't know. And if someone says it happens because of faith, and if someone says, no, it's not, neither person is going to convince the other. You can't prove it.
I just really didn't like the whole standing up and not being handicapped anymore. I just thought that that was a little bit almost insulting, because that is the whole point of what these con man revivalist things do. You know, if maybe in the end he was just kind of selling a little bit of faith, just have faith you're going to be the 1 out of 100. Don't worry about the 99. You're going to be that one. My big problem with this film, Al, is that I really liked that Jonas was kind of this scumbag, but there was a scumbag with, I think there were some morals deep down there. You know, there's an Anakin Skywalker somewhere in this Darth Vader. I don't know, he's not quite Darth Vader, but I just don't think that his redemption in the end is really that believable to me. I mean, this guy's been conning people for years, and he never once saw some handicapped person that said, make me walk again. That never affected him. It only was when this one kid asked him to walk again. Or I just didn't really buy his redemption. And I thought maybe he would do something for the town. He just kind of runs away. And that's good that he's not going to con people anymore. I just didn't like how it resolved. I was really hoping for a really good resolution, other than it just raining at the end.
It's funny that you use the word redemption. I don't know that Jonas is redeemed.
I don't think he necessarily is. I agree with you. I don't think he does anything that's actually redemption. I think he feels bad about it and he quits being a con artist. But that's not redemption.
Does he quit being a con artist? We don't know that.
That's a good point.
He leaves town. He leaves his mirrored jacket, and he leaves Jane the ring that she wants. We don't know where he's going. Oh, well, actually, we do know. We know he's going to Pensacola, Florida. And apparently I saw in the trivia that shortly after this movie came out, there was a huge revival, and like one of the biggest ever, in Pensacola, Florida, which is just a coincidence. Or is it? I don't know. But, you know, I think that Jonas, I don't think, has a redemption storyline. I think he does have an arc where he learns a lesson, kind of, and just decides that he's not going to do this particular con with this particular group of people anymore. Whether he's going to turn over a new leaf or not is up for you to decide. I feel like I'm defending this movie a lot, and its script specifically, and to be clear, there are script problems, and I do think that the way that his story ends is frustrating and really could have been written much, much better. But I'm just saying that in terms of big picture, he does have an arc. It's not a redemption arc. It is almost like a sinner kind of coming to Jesus in a pretty literal way, where he realizes the error of his ways and he's moving on. maybe you could say it is a redemption if by acknowledging his sins, then he will be forgiven by Jesus. I guess. I mean, now we're getting into some kind of deep theology and Christianity stuff that I do not feel qualified to discuss at all as a Jew. Sorry to nitpick on the word redemption, but I don't think that is the right word, but also maybe, I don't know.
I think they were going for it. I just think that there's an undercooked third act. And you said something really clever about we don't know that he's not going to be a con man anymore. I truly believe he's not going to be a faith-based con man anymore. But I think, if he gets his way to Reno or Vegas or something, he's going to do great there until, he cons the wrong person.
Maybe. But James, let me ask you about the movie as a whole. Do you think that Leap of Faith stands a test of time?
Unfortunately, I don't think this movie stands a test of time. I think that this film has a great premise, and the way I could prove it's a great premise, the Righteous Gemstones. You've seen this series, Al?
Of course. I love Danny McBride. I will watch that man in anything. And Righteous Gemstones is phenomenal.
The premise of these swindlers, it's really ripe for comedy, that these people deep down are such scumbags and they're so different than their personas on stage, and they're screaming, cursing, toilet word. Suddenly the curtain opens, praise Jesus. And there's comedy in this. Interestingly, this film was made into a musical. I only really know this fact because I actually used to date one of the producers of this musical.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, she was this producer on Broadway. I briefly dated her.
Did she get you in to see the show?
Not this show. This show lasted like 20 performances. It was not a success. I do remember she did take me once to another musical, The Book of Mormon, and we sat in what's called the producer seats. I guess they apparently just, trade them to each other. But like the musical, just not working for many reasons, this film just it didn't connect. I really think there's a good remake here, and maybe the remake is The Righteous Gemstones. I just wish it was a better movie. Huge fan of Steve Martin. I thought the set design was fantastic. I thought that the music in this film, oh my God, that church choir that they have in this film is so good. And they play throughout the film. There's some great things in this film. Maybe it was a script and the story for me just didn't all come together. So it doesn't stand the test of time. What do you think, Al? Leap of Faith, the 1992 film, does it stand the test of time?
Well, before I answer that, I do just want to say one thing about Righteous Gemstones. I don't think it's a perfect analogy because Righteous Gemstones is sort of a-religious. Like, John Goodman's character seems to have genuine faith in Jesus and God and the Bible. No one else ever talks about it. They talk about it when they're doing their sermons and when they're on TV and when they're in public, but the show isn't really pro-religion or anti-religion. It's more just about the family, which is good and interesting, and I love the show, but I think that it's not really about faith. And I think that this movie is trying to be about faith, and I think it is trying to say something interesting about faith. And while I was thinking about it today, I was thinking that an atheist and a devout Christian could watch this movie and both love it for totally different reasons. They could both get very, very different meanings and messages out of the movie. Like, a devout Christian could look at this movie and say, yeah, of course, faith is real. That's what this movie is saying. Everything that happens is God's will. The fact that this truck breaks down at this exact location in this exact town, come on, that's God's will. And Sheriff Will meets this woman who he was destined to meet, and Boyd was destined to be healed, and Jonas was destined to see the error of his ways. This is God's work. God is real. God is good. This could be very faith affirming. On the other hand, if you're an atheist, you could look at this movie and say, yeah, It's like I said, all this religion stuff is bullshit. It's all smoke and mirrors. That's what these people do. They rip people off. They con people. Boyd, at the end, I think they would probably just chalk up to, he wasn't really that injured, and maybe it was kind of psychosomatic or whatever. Rain is rain, and that's whether it would have happened anyway. So I think that you could be on either extreme and have this movie reaffirm your beliefs. For me, as a person who is not a devout Christian or an atheist, I am I guess, secular Jew. I feel like the movie doesn't fully land on either of those sides. To me, I think it's more just a incomplete script. And even though I was playing devil's advocate about the script throughout this episode, I think it is worth pointing out that the screenwriter, a guy named Janis Circoni, he has only one other feature script listed on his IMDb, and that is the movie Ed, which is about a monkey that plays baseball or something.
With Matt LeBlanc, I think, right?
I just clicked on it. Yes, you're right. It is Matt LeBlanc. The poster is Matt LeBlanc high-fiving a chimpanzee. In case you were wondering, it has an IMDb rating of 2.8 out of 10. I'm guessing that's a poorly written movie. I've never seen it, and I really don't fucking want to. I think Leap of Faith has script problems. It really could have ended on a stronger note. I appreciate some ambiguity with the idea of faith because that does make sense, but it just doesn't land. It doesn't really give you a sense of closure. I'm also okay with Jonas just leaving town. I would have been pretty pissed off if as soon as the rain started, he would have said, "Get me back to town," and then he goes and kisses the waitress, Marva. That would have been really fucking stupid. I'm glad they didn't do that. But it also does end abruptly and weirdly. Also, from a test of time perspective, the tricks that they're doing, they're less impressive now in 2024 because of social media. If a whole bunch of people show up in a tent in the middle of nowhere, any young person could just find out any detail about any of these people just by being good at social media, by being good at Instagram and TikTok or whatever. And the illusion of it, I think, would be far less impressive today. I have no idea if these revival tents are popular now, if they're more popular or less popular. I don't know. But I just think from the perspective of seeing it in a movie, I think that in 1992, this idea of, oh, they're using computers and wireless microphones to talk to each other. Whoa! That was maybe a bigger deal than today. It's just, yeah, of course. So what? That's not impressive. So I agree with you that the movie does not stand the test of time. This is completely random, neither here nor there, has nothing to do with the movie standing the test of time, but Meatloaf is in it in a small role. He plays the bus driver, and at one point they are in the car and they hear Paradise by the Dashboard Lights on the radio, which is weird. Like, if you want to put Meatloaf in your movie, put him in your movie. If you want to put a Meatloaf song in your movie, that's great too, but doing both just seems strange. That just seems like a weird choice. But that's going to do it for us this week. Next week, we're going to talk about a movie that I'm pretty sure has less religious undertones, although maybe not. We're going to talk about The Transformers, the movie.
Was Shia LaBeouf directed by Michael Bay?
No. I am talking about the animated movie from 1986. There's a new animated Transformers movie that's coming out. So we're going to go back to the original animated Transformers movie with special guest Clinton Festa. I happen to know he's excited about coming back on the show. I am not really excited to watch this movie, but I am excited to talk with Clint. He's always a great guest, and I'm sure that's going to be a really fun conversation.
Oh, it's going to be fun. He joined us for Purple Rain and Conan the Barbarian, and now he's going to join us for Transformers, the movie.
The Transformers, the movie. There's two thes in there. That's very important. The Michael Bay movie was just Transformers. He couldn't afford the thes. No, he blew them up. That's what he did. But until then, we want to hear your thoughts on Leap of Faith, on revivalists, on faith in general. Let's get into religion on social media. What could go wrong with that conversation? It'll be great. No one will get offended. It'll be wonderful. We are at Test of Time Pod on Facebook, X, Instagram, and Threads. And we'll see you next time, everybody.
Bye.